Yo, what is up, you guys? Barokoshama here with another Elemental Shaman video. This one is kind of crazy. It's going to be a very in-depth and extremely hard playstyle guide for that playstyle thingy that we're doing. Anyway, this build, I'm pretty sure, originated in the Asian servers. And making its way over to the US where people are picking it up. And I figured this is so advanced, this type of build is so advanced in the way that you need to play it and play it successfully that it needs to be explained and explained well. And I'm going to try my very best to do so. I made up some priority spell rotations, an opener guide, and stat priorities for you guys to use with this build. This is, in fact, probably the hardest, if not one of the hardest specs to play in the game. Elemental Shaman. Specifically using the legendary shoulders, the legendary boots, and Ice Fury. Talents, as well as Aftershock. So like a gamble build variation, but also like it's on steroids. Like it's on steroids or it's on crack. I can't tell the difference. But anyway, let's get into the guide. A lot of people have been anticipating this since I started talking about it on my live stream. If you guys want to check out my live stream, twitch.tv/Barokoshama. The link will be in the description of this video down below. If you guys also want to like, share, and comment on this video, you can. Comment nice things, hopefully. Subscribe if you want more Elemental Shaman content. You know, like it if you like the video. Don't like, that's fine too. You slap that dislike, I don't, whatever. Anyway, let's get into the video guide. All right, moving on to the next step in this section. Well, by the way, I got a fresh haircut, so that's different. In this section, we're going to be talking about everything that you guys need to know in order to play effectively the Frost-Quake build. We're naming it the Frost-Quake build. That's its name. Deal with it. Spread the word. Anyway, things that you guys need to know in order for this build to work. You should be equipping shoulders, legendaries, Echoes of the Great Sundering. Okay. The boots legendaries, Deceiver's Blood Pact. You should be using Frost Shock, Aftershock, and whatever other talents. So you got Totem Mastery in there too. Obviously, Gust of Wind for mobility, Lightning Surge Totem for utility, Elemental Blast, obviously, because Elemental Blast is really, really great, and Echoes of the Elements. All these talents are used to make this build work. I find that's the best there is for this build. It's specific to this build, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go over talents. I mean, we already went over talents. We're going to go over stat priorities, spell priorities, opening rotation in this guide, everything that you guys need to know. So, let's get into it. All right, we're in the Shaman class hall. We're going to quickly, again, go over everything that you guys need to know for this build to work, including the talents and gear setup. Here's the talents: Totem Mastery, Gust of Wind for mobility, Lightning Surge Totem for utility, Aftershock. This is a must because it is a offset of the gamble build. Okay, this is like another version of it, but it's kind of crazier. Elemental Blast. It's just the best one out of these three tiers. Echo the Elements works so well with tier 21, but we're going to talk about that in just a bit. So Echo the Elements is another staple in this build, and Ice Fury. This is the Frost-Quake build. It's called Frost-Quake because we used Ice Fury as well as the legendary shoulders for Earthquake, aka Frost-Quake. Alright. Legendary setup is the Echoes of the Great Sundering shoulder pads and the Deceiver's Blood Pact boots. It is a variation of the gamble build. You combine the boots with Aftershock, it makes a gamble build. The Echoes of the Great Sundering works into this. And the entire idea behind this build is high mobility and low damage variance. right? So our damage variance is squished from Ascendant's Gamble build, so we're not relying on Ascendant's procs in order to deal the bulk of our damage. We are relying on our skilled spell priority, putting it in a certain order so that things just do a shit ton of damage, and it's not as RNG based, and it's freaking amazing, okay? Another thing that you guys need for this build is at least tier 21 2 set, because the 20% damage increase that you get from your lava burst, the buff is called Earth and Strength, goes into your Earth Shocks, Earthquake, and Frost Shocks. All three of those we're using in this build. And we're pretty much not wasting a single proc of these. We're always going to be using one of these Earth and Strengths. We're going to be using every single one of these Earth and Strengths on something, because there's always something going on in your build that can use that buff. It meshes perfectly well with it, and I recommend doing it. Lastly, you're going to need some Weakauras. I think you're definitely going to need some Weakauras to track this. I'm going to show you guys what Weakauras I have for you to offer. And it is an entire set of Shaman Weakauras. These Weakauras track your Flame Shock on the target, your uptime on your Fire Elemental, Lust, Echoes of the Great Sundering. If it has procced, there's your Stormkeeper, Power of the Maelstrom, Elemental Focus, and Earth and Strength, the 2-piece set bonus for your tier 21, as well as an Ice Fury tracker, your Maelstrom bar, and a little totem. Well, not little, it's actually one of the biggest Weakauras here. It is a tracker for you, whether you're in range or your totems are just not or you're not in range of your totems, or they're just not active. So this tracks that. So you have the red, you have the blue underneath, which shows you that you are in fact in range of it, and then it pulses red if you're out of range or if it's just not down. So there's that one. We have one for troll berserking. If you're a troll, I have a troll, so I have this. Your flame shocks. This is 3 separate Weakauras for this. Okay, one tracks if it is missing, one tracks if it's low, one tracks if it's on the target, and then we also have an elemental focus for flame shock. This will track whether or not it is on the target, if your elemental focus is buffing the flame shock that's currently on your target. So it'll show up like that. We have 2 for Echoes of the Great Sundering. One of them is for when it procs. Another is for when you should be casting it. So it's going to glow if you have an elemental or an earth and strength buff. And then we also have one that tracks earth and strength. Your Maelstrom bar, obviously. It's going to pulsate with this electrical graphic if you're getting at high Maelstrom, and you're going to be needing to expel that Maelstrom quickly with an Earth Shock. Stormkeeper just tracks that, Power of the Maelstrom. So a lot of useful tracking Weakauras. I recommend picking these up. They will be in the comments section down below. A paste bin to the, thing where you can get it and then import it. If you guys don't know how to import that, I'll show you really quickly. You're going to go over to New, Import, and then you're going to import the entire code string of text. It's just going to be a wall of text. You're going to import that into here. It's going to pop up. You're going to say import right down here, and then you're going to have it on your screen. It is, what's the word? It is made for my UI. So if you want my UI as well, I'll be putting the paste bin to that in the video's description down below. If you don't have ELV UI, I recommend getting it if you want this specific UI. If you need to know how to import an ELV UI string, simply type in your chat /EC. Then you go into Profiles, Import Profile, and the same thing. You're going to just copy paste that wall of text in here. You're going to do Import Now, and then it's just going to switch your UI over to what mine is. Anyway, we've gone over gear, talents, Weakauras to help you. Let's talk about stat priority. So stat priority is kind of specific. I have this here. I just kind of like threw this up really quickly. I'm actually going to just shorten it. There we go. So it's a little guy on the screen. Your stat priority is a little different than your regular spells. Crit is still on top because crit is just so damn good. It works exceptionally well with our Elemental Fury. Elemental Fury, that's what it's called, right? Elemental Fury. I have 275% increased critical strike or effectiveness of my critical strikes because I have 5 points in elemental destabilization. Okay, so your critical strike damage, your damaging critical strikes deal 275 damage instead of the normal 200%. Not to mention elemental focus, increasing your direct spells, your direct damaging spell, critical strikes, increase the damage and healing of your next 2 spells by 10%. I mean, this plays an important factor into our rotation, especially with Flame Shock uptime. But an additional 10% anytime we crit, 2 stacks of an additional 10%. This is huge. So, crit is pretty much an essential part of our build. Not to mention our Lava Bursts are always critting if Flame Shock's on the target. And we have a lot of hard-hitting spells, right? So Earth Shock, that can crit for an absurd amount of damage on a single like instant cast spell. It's kind of crazy. Frost Shocks as well, not to mention tier 21 4-piece. If our Frost Shocks or Earth Shocks overload, if those overloads are from critical strike Earth Shocks or Frost Shocks, it's kind of a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage. It's laughable. But anyway, after that versatility, haste loses. Now I know you guys are going to ask why versatility. And that's because haste loses its value when we're on high movement fights and we're casting a lot of single, or not single, but instant cast spells. We have Frost Shocks in our kit, we have Earth Shocks in our kit, we have Stormkeeper, Lightning Bolts in our kit that we're casting instant cast. We have the Echoes of the Great Sundering, Earthquake procs from our Legendary Shoulders that are instant cast. Like, we have a lot of instant cast spells. Haste is not required for those instant cast spells, and that's the majority of our kit, right? Are those instant cast spells. So that makes haste less valued because we're not standing there in a channeling cast bar for the majority of our damage. Okay, so this makes actually versatility go up because it is a base percentage increase in our damage. Versatility. Mastery is held down there just like haste because we don't need it. It doesn't affect or scale with our tier 21 4 set. That doesn't increase its overload, and our overloads are going to be from Lava Bursts, Elemental Blast, Ice Furies, Lightning Bolts, but we're really never casting Lightning Bolts unless it's from Stormkeepers, right? So Mastery is definitely lower than Critical Strike and Versatility. Let's move on to one of the most important sections of the build. We're going to talk about our opening sequence for our spells. I drew this up for you guys. Now this is a guide that I created. There's nothing like this on the internet right now. So I made this up for you guys, including the spell priority. We're just going to full screen it. Opening rotation. Again, guys, this is going to be ridiculously fast-paced. You're going to have to make quick decisions. You're going to have to practice this a lot. I need a drink of water. My throat's getting a little dry. You're going to have to practice this a lot. Your opening rotation is a lot similar, or a lot simpler than your spell priority. But it's also a lot similar to other opening rotations in certain regards. So let's get into it. 4 seconds before the pull, we're going to put down our totem masteries. 3 seconds, while not targeting the boss, because your fire elemental will pull, unless you have that specific macro that people are using, yada yada, I don't use it. While not targeting the boss, we're going to pre-pot and fire elemental 3 seconds before the pull. 2 seconds, we're going to start pre-casting Elemental Blast. And on the pull, we're going to apply Flame Shock. If we are bloodlusting at the start of the fight, this is where we would Heroism right after the first Flame Shock. And then after that, we're going to be using our first cast and charge of Lava Burst. We're using Echo of the Elements, right? So we have 2 charges of Lava Burst. This is important. We're going to use the first one here. And then note, this will proc Elemental Focus, giving us our 2 stack of 10% increased damage and an Earth and Strength buff from our tier 21 2-set bonus. We're then going to cast Stormkeeper and Ice Fury. Your Ice Fury is going to consume one of these Elemental Focus stacks, and then we're going to immediately Flame Shock. That is going to consume the second Elemental Focus blast, or Elemental Focus buff. It's also going to be at max duration from the Maelstrom that we gained from Ice Fury and Lava Burst. It's going to be at max duration, and it's going to be buffed by the Elemental Focus, okay? After that, we're going to Lava Burst. All right, we still, remember, we still have this Earth and Strength buff from our first Lava Burst. We're going to Lava Burst and then immediately cast Frost Shock twice. The first Frost Shock that we cast is going to be buffed by our first Earth and Strength buff. So it's going to be increased in damage by 20%. The second one is going to be also buffed by our second Lava Burst cast, increasing its damage by 20%. So these casts will be buffed by Ice Fury, right, because we casted that earlier, and will be increased in damage by Earth and Strength. After that, we continue with our normal rotation. So your opening rotation is pretty set in stone. You should be doing this exactly. And then we're going to go into our actual spell priority, which is all over the place. It's kind of crazy, but I'm going to be explaining it to you guys to the best of my ability. Okay? Okay. Let's get into it. Where is it? Here it is. It's big. It's long. But you know what? Size doesn't matter. Okay. This may seem to be a big wall of text, but we're going to go over it piece by piece so that you guys understand. Your spell priority. Note, this is important. It is important to understand that with our Elemental Tier 21 2-set bonus, Lava Burst generates buffs of Earth and Strength. The Earth and Strength buffs gives us 20% extra damage on our Earthquakes, Earth Shocks, and Frost Shocks. 3 spells that we use in this rotation, okay? With that in mind, weaving Lava Bursts in between important spell casts is an essential part of this build. These spell casts in order of importance, okay, are Earthquake, Earth Shock, and Frost Shock. In order of importance, keep that in mind. So Earthquake, we always pretty much want to be using Earth and Strength. Half the time, Earth Shocks are going to be used by Earth and Strength, and then a fraction of the time, Frost Shocks are going to be used with Earth and Strength. So let's get into the spell priority. Cast Totem Mastery at number 1 if it is absent, if it's out of range, or if it will expire in the 3 seconds. Remember, we have Weakauras to track these kind of things, right? So you don't need to be left in the dark. Use the Weakauras that we have. Apply Flame Shock if it is absent on the target, or if it will expire in 9 seconds or less. Your Maelstrom is 20 or higher, and you have a stack of Elemental Focus. Again, we have Weakauras to track these things, alright? So take advantage of those. Cast Elemental Blast on cooldown. Elemental Blast is like ridiculously powerful because of the amount of stats that it gives us, okay? Those stats, Elemental Blast is pretty much used to empower the rest of your abilities. So with that in mind, it should be cast on cooldown. On cooldown. This is where things get a little nutty, okay? And a bit of adaptive play and quick thinking comes in handy. Number 4, and it's a big spell priority, okay? But we'll go over it, okay? So don't lose your marbles yet. Cast Earthquake if Echoes of the Great Sundering, so the buff from our legendary shoulders, and Earth and Strength is not active. Wait. Your Maelstrom is 80 or higher. This is due to prevent the potential waste of Echoes of the Great Sundering procs. So, This is up here because you're going to get situations, right, where you're up in Maelstrom, okay, and you Earth Shock. But then your shoulders proc as well as your Deceiver's Bloodpact boots. So you get a bunch of Maelstrom, right? So Earthquake or Earthshock becomes a Maelstrom generator. You have to spend that Maelstrom, okay? So in this situation, you're going to put out the unbuffed Earthquake. Say Earth and Strength is not active, but your Maelstrom is 80 or higher. So you're going to put out that unbuffed Earthquake, and then you're going to immediately Earthshock after to try and not waste the Echoes of the Great Sundering procs. Because if you just Earthshock, you have a potential to waste the one stack of Echoes of the Great Sundering. Moving on to the second part of this spell priority. Cast Earthquake if, right, so we covered this, or Echoes of the Great Sundering buff is active from our Legendary Shoulders, as well as Earth and Strength, the tier 21 2-piece bonus is active. With this in mind, when we get Earthquake buffs from our Legendary Shoulders, we pretty much want to sit on it until we get an Earth and Strength buff. The only time we don't sit on it is the time that we talked about before this. If we have high ass Maelstrom, if our boots procced, or if we just gained way too much Maelstrom before we could get a Lava Burst out, right? So we got to get rid of that Earthquake. That's the only time that we don't use it without an Earth and Strength buff. So keep that in mind. We're going to be sitting on the Echoes of the Great Sundering Shoulders proc until we get Lava Burst out there with Earth and Strength. Number 5, we cast our Earth Shock when our Maelstrom is at 80 or higher. This is due to the interaction between Aftershock and the Deceiver's Bloodpact legendary boots. The boots that we're using in Aftershock talent. Aftershock, our Maelstrom spenders refund 30% of the Maelstrom spent. Okay? So that is important to note. 80 or higher is pretty much a safe zone for us as far as Maelstrom value goes in this rotation, so that if your boots proc, you're not capping your Maelstrom, but 80 Maelstrom is still a high enough value of Maelstrom for our Echoes of the Great Sundering Legendary Shoulders. Its percentage of proc chance per Maelstrom spent is also high, right? So it has up to an 80 or up to a 50% chance based on Maelstrom spent to give us the Echoes of the Great Sundering buff to buff our Earthquake by 100% increased damage and cost no Maelstrom, right? 80 or higher Maelstrom. No, now you don't always have to be casting Earthshock at 80. Like that 80 is not like the concrete value, right? Just 80 or higher, because that's the safe zone. Stormkeeper at number 6 and Ice Fury at number 7. Stormkeeper and Ice Fury are important cooldowns because they always want to be on cooldown. They always want to be on cooldown. Stormkeeper is a lot easier to put on cooldown sooner because it costs no Maelstrom to activate. Whereas Ice Fury, you can get into situations where casting Ice Fury and putting it on cooldown will cap your Maelstrom or just put you over Maelstrom that you want to be at. Put you over a value of Maelstrom that is out of your comfort zone, right? So this is kind of like the part of where I want to talk about how important Maelstrom management is, but also the importance of keeping your things on cooldown. Keeping your cooldowns, your high damage CDs on cooldown. This build is very confusing. It's all about juggling your stacks of Ice Fury, Stormkeeper, Echoes of the Great Sundering, and your Maelstrom. It's really crazy, okay? But once you get the spell priority down, once you understand exactly what you need to do, if you can do your quick thinking and adaptive play, this build is a lot of fun. First of all, it's effective in high movement situations like Mythic Agrimar, where I'm currently playing it and doing a ridiculous amount of damage, okay? And it's just breaking the meta. Like, we're out of the RNG state now with this build. Like, it's still a little bit RNG, but it's just hell of a lot less. Okay, so number 8, cast Lightning Bolt if Power of the Maelstrom is active, and Stormkeeper. Of course, we know that Power of the Maelstrom becomes active from our Lava Burst, right? So we cast Lava Burst, we have a chance to activate Power of the Maelstrom. Power of the Maelstrom makes our Lightning Bolts Elemental Overload an additional time. So this is very important to cast Lightning Bolt while Stormkeeper is active in Power of the Maelstrom. We're going to do a quick note later on about this, but for now, let's move on to Frost Shocks. Unbuffed. And I say unbuffed because Earth and Strength is not buffing it. Remember, we had the note up here, Earth and Strength's not buffing it. So unbuffed. Cast Frost Shock unbuffed if you have 20 or more Maelstrom, and you have a stack of Ice Fury, has 2 seconds or less. So Ice Fury gives us 4 stacks of, what, 400% increased damage to our Frost Shocks? I think it's 400%. I'm just going to quickly check. 400%, yeah. I mean, I should know that, but... Anyway. 20 or more Maelstrom, because if we don't have 20 Maelstrom, the damage of the Frost Shock is reduced, so there's really no point in casting it. But we have 2 seconds left on our Ice Fury per stack. If your last stack of Ice Fury has 2 seconds or less. This is where we just want to dump it, right? Remember, we're still paying attention to our other spells that are in higher priority, but in this situation, if we don't have much time left on our Frost Shocks, it doesn't matter if they're unbuffed. Just get rid of them, because if you don't get rid of them, that stack was a waste. It was a waste of damage. Moving on to number 10. We're going to be casting Lava Burst if Stormkeeper has 3 seconds or more remaining and Power of the Maelstrom is not active. Fishing for procs. If you guys don't know about this, you should. So I'll give you the situation. I'll give you a scenario. We've just casted Stormkeeper, alright? So we have our 3 stacks of empowered lightning bolts that are instant cast and dealing 200% increased damage. We have Lava Burst active. Not Lava Burst active, but we have Lava Burst available to use. We want to use those Lava Bursts, especially if we don't have any Power of the Maelstrom stacks. Use those Lava Bursts, try and fish for the Power of the Maelstrom stacks. If you can't get them, then use the Lightning Bolts while Stormkeeper is active. Look, cast Lightning Bolt while Stormkeeper is active, but the one before, we're going to be casting Lava Burst to try and get the Power of the Maelstrom procs, right? So if we can't get them, we're obviously going to be using Stormkeeper with Lightning Bolt on its own. Since we already talked about 11 in there, we're going to talk about 12. Cast Lava Burst when Lava Surge procs. Lava Surge is a free Lava Burst, and it also resets the cooldown of it, right? So Lava Burst being an essential part of our kit because of the tier 21 2-set bonus always giving us Earth and Strength buffs, it is important to try and get that instant cast out. Like I said, though, it's not as important as your other spell priorities that are above that. But keeping Lava Burst on cooldown and keeping its recharge active is an essential part of juggling this build. Number 13, cast Frost Shock buffed with 20 Maelstrom or higher and Ice Fury is active. Again, so like we're casting Lava Burst in our other priorities here. And then we can cast our Frost Shocks buffed from Earth and Strength, the tier 21 2-set bonus. After that, Lightning Bolt while Power of the Maelstrom is active. We want to get rid of some of these stacks if we don't have Stormkeeper to really take advantage of them. We want to try and get rid of them so that we don't overlap them with another Lava Burst. So that's why Lightning Bolt is above. Lightning Bolt with Power of the Maelstrom is above a Lava Burst. Of course, if you have 2 stacks of Lava Burst available, and then you have like 2 stacks of Power of the Maelstrom, get rid of one of those Lava Bursts, or even 3 stacks of Power of the Maelstrom. It's unlikely that you're going to refresh the Power of the Maelstrom, but it's important to understand your situations when you should be casting Lava Burst over Lightning Bolt with Power of the Maelstrom, mainly with 2 stacks of Lava Burst, just to put it on cooldown. Of course, casting Lava Burst comes after that, and then Lightning Bolt as a filler. So, this is a pretty long spell priority. It's very much reliant on adaptive play, quick decision making, like I said, reacting to procs, and really understanding the fundamentals of your spell priority. Because if you don't, you're going to get overwhelmed with all of these procs and buttons lighting up and your max Maelstrom, and then you have your Stormkeeper to get rid of, your Ice Sphere to get rid of, and then also you have Earthquakes proccing, and left and right you get overwhelmed, right? So it's important to understand your flow of battle here, understanding your spell priority, practice it. If you guys want to take advantage of this new Frost-Quake build, you have to practice it. Now I'm going to show you guys what it looks like in play. Alright, so I'm going to Augment Rune, I'm going to Flask, and I'm going to Food Buff. And then I'm going to show you guys exactly what it looks like. So we're going to follow the spell priority, we're going to follow the opening rotation, and then we're going to end the video with a conclusion. So totems down. Actually, we're going to do a DBM pull. 10 seconds. I move back and forth to get ready.
5,
Totems.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Lust, Lava Burst, Ice Fury, Stormkeeper, Flame Shock, Lava Burst, Frost Shocks, 2. I don't have any Power of the Maelstrom procs, so I'm gonna use a Stormkeeper there. It's adaptive play, right? Okay, now we're getting into the regular priority. So we had a Lava Burst, or a Echoes of the Great Sundering proc there. And then I used a Lava Burst in between that to proc Earth and Strength to buff that Earthquake. Ice Fury is coming off cooldown. We're going to use that and a Lava Burst here. Refresh Flame Shock. Casting Frost Shocks without the buffs from Earth and Strength. Now we have High Maelstrom. We Earth Shock there. I'm going to get rid of some of these stacks of Power of the Maelstrom. I'm going to Lava Burst, Elemental Blast, and then I'm going to Earth Shock. Earth Shock here. I'm not getting any procs from my shoulders, unfortunately. Stormkeeper, Elemental Blast, Frost Shock, or Ice Fury. Refresh Flame Shock, Frost Shock, Lava Burst, Frost Shock. Now I'm going to get rid of my Stormkeepers. I was trying to fish for Power of the Maelstrom procs through the Lava Burst that I had coming up. Unfortunately, I didn't get one. Okay, here's an Earthquake proc. Gonna Lava Burst before I put that down so I can benefit from the Earth and Strength. Gonna refresh Flame Shock here. Ice Fury, Frost Shock, Lava Burst, Frost Shock. So I got rid of all of my Frost Shocks. Elemental Blast is coming up. Totems are down again. High Maelstrom. Earthquake's out. Refresh Flame. I probably shouldn't have refreshed Flame Shock there, actually. Stormkeeper, Lava Burst, Stormkeeper stacks. Earth Shock here. Ice Fury. I should have ELE blasted there. So we're going to do that. 2, 3, 4. We're at low Maelstrom, so I put a Lava Burst in there before I Frost Shocked. Alright, so this is where we're going to end the demonstration of the build. Obviously you can see that it's sustaining quite high in the damage. And this is far more effective in high movement situations. Alright, now that we've talked about everything that you guys need to know, I'm just going to conclude the video, alright? Alright guys, we are concluding the Frost-Quake build now. Definitely like it if you like the video. Subscribe if you want more Elemental Shaman content. Remember that you need to follow your spell priority, and you have to have some adaptive play and quick thinking for this build. It can perform exceptionally well in high movement fights, and I definitely recommend trying it out. If you guys are interested in checking out my live stream at twitch.tv/Barokoshama, I'll be putting the link to that in the description down below, as well as everything that you need for this guide. I'm going to be putting the imagers for the spell and stat priorities, the opening rotation, the Weakauras, my UI, everything that you need to know is going to be down below. If you guys want to check me out on my Twitter and Instagram social medias, I'll also be putting the links to those in the description down below. Alright, this is a bit of a long video, but I'm glad I got it out, and I can't wait to see your reaction and comments. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, stay calm, and Maelstrom on.